This is live the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me, I have Dr. Nnaemeka, investment banker and development economist, as well as Chude, public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on this day live the Sunday talk show. Well, today we have had three guests talking about electoral reform. That's Honorable Adebayo Balogun, chairman of the House Committee on electoral reforms. We've also talked about the developing situation in Sierra Leone within the context of the challenge of democratic consolidation in Africa and recommendations by President Olusegun Obasanjo for a homegrown type of democracy, Afro-democracy. We also looked at the situation in the Middle East, the exchange of hostages between Israel and Hamas, resulting in a 4-day truce with the hope that maybe that will lead to a ceasefire. And then we looked at developments in the aviation sector, focusing on reciprocity, access to markets, equity, particularly in terms of how the Nigerian government defends the interests of its own domestic carriers and its flag carriers operating within the international space to ensure that there is equity and that diplomacy protects the interests of Nigerians. Over to you. Let me start with you, Dr. Biariri.
Okay, first of all, I will take the issue of electoral reform, which is at the root of the current decay we have in Nigeria. And like we have always maintained, transparency and accountability in governance is the bedrock of democracy. And when you have a transparent, accountable government that is competent, that is patriotic, that is very passionate about development of the people and the country, things will always move forward. So basically what we have witnessed over the last 8 years, it has been deep erosions of the gains that we had under Goodluck Jonathan. Remember, he was the first president to introduce electronics, voters card verification. All the gains that we made over the last 8 years was lost in 2003. Basically, the charade of February 25th, March 18th, and the latest episode of November 11, 2023 across the states where we had that were off-cycle elections. Now, what are the electoral reforms we are talking about? We have the OYS report and many other things that we have recommended. The Electoral Act that we thought that Buhari signed into law that will have helped to enhance transparency have actually been beaten by the political actors. We've seen what has happened. INEC has also lost track. The INEC that we had under Humphrey Mosu that conducted the freest and the fairest election in 1993, the INEC that we had in 2015 is not the INEC that we have today. We have clearly an INEC that is out to destroy every gain that we have made since 1999, looking at the loopholes in the Electoral Act. What are those loopholes? Nigeria is the only place where elections at the polling booths are not the final place that are recognized. What was the essence of IREV? The essence of IREV was we knew what would happen before 2023, where political actors will pad results along the line at the ward collection centers and local government. The essence of IREV, which was enunciated by the INEC chairman at different fora, was that at the polling booth, results will be uploaded into the server. If at the collation center, the results at the server is at discrepancy with the one at the collation center, the one at IREF will supersede. That was the whole essence. But we saw what happened and the judiciary gave them a seal. Now, I listened to the young man that came here, the chairman House Committee on, and I was so disappointed. He was even telling you that diaspora voting is futuristic. In Africa, Botswana, Kenya, almost about 12 countries in Africa, have adopted diaspora voting since 2013. Kenya conducted their last presidential election. The diasporans voted in 12 countries. And Nigeria is one country that have huge diaspora voters, almost about 5 million. Diasporans have impacted so much the development of this economy. We always brag, we have the biggest diaspora remittances, $25 billion. But I say to anybody, I'm an investment banker, I run the numbers. I've worked with NIDOA Africa, NIDOA Europe, NIDOA America, NIDOA Asia. I know these guys and I know their capacity. The Nigerians in diaspora have potentials to remit nothing less than $100 billion annually as investment if we have a transparent electoral, security, and economic boosting environment. And it can only happen when we have electoral reforms. Diaspora voting must be allowed, sacrosanct. America has very transparent electoral process. We saw what happened in Liberia. Little Liberia, what George Weah did. Very transparent election, result announced, and he conceded. We saw what happened in Kenya. Despite the fact that the president and all the establishment were against Ruto, Ruto still won because the elections were very transparent and petitions were treated before swearing in. These are the kind of things we must be looking at. One, the law should be amended to make it compulsory. Any election that is not uploaded from the polling booth, it will not be accepted anywhere. And the results declare that the polling booth should be sacrosanct and be the only result acceptable elsewhere. And the results must be uploaded. Diaspora voters should be allowed to vote. There is no skyrocket science about it. Mail-in ballot system. What we should be looking at is to look at what other countries are doing. You ask them, they will tell you, oh, America is 200 years democracy. Singapore is 55 years. Indonesia, the same thing with Nigeria. Botswana, even South Africa that gained independence from apartheid in the 1990s are doing diaspora voting. There is no skyrocket science about it. Nigeria must embrace it. We must execute massive reforms. But the doubt here is, who are those that will execute those reforms? I was so impressed with the last speaker that came here who was analyzing these things. And it's very, very true. Those, Joe Keshi, the same people who are saddled with making this law will always find a way of circumventing it. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to use this word automatically. The judiciary we have now is no longer a judiciary that we had under the lives of the Owais, under the lives of Chude. We have, every state institution had been captured. It will only take a miracle for God to be able to touch them, to do the right things, to ensure that these reforms are executed. If we fail to execute electoral reform, I can tell you, Dr. Abati, in 2027, Nigerians will not come out to vote.
Well, Achike, your view.
Yeah, well, you know, we were part of the process of this electoral law that was signed in 2022 by the former president. It was as a result of a very serious advocacy by Nigerians in general, civil society organizations, the media, everybody played a role. And then we thought that yes, this is the solution. And I think we looked at so many things in the processes, and we felt, look, yes, technology has to drive it and all that. But unfortunately, you know, when we're looking at tangible and intangible processes involved, in the process itself, we forgot the human element, which it would seem is the most important. And I think a lot of us feel actually bad about the fact that perhaps we overlooked it. We didn't know how important it was because there was an assumption that the people, the organizers, the practitioners were going to play by the rules. And I'm not just talking about politicians. The politicians have always been the fourth line in Nigeria's election and Nigeria's democratization process. When Atahiru Jega left in 2015, he was very angry about the attitude of the politicians. And so we now began to work on the INEC and then all the other surrounding institutions, ancillary institutions that were going to help to make a very good, seamless election possible, free, fair, credible election possible. INEC was being worked on in terms of engagement. Then the security services were also being worked on and all the other factors. But what we saw, like I said, was that the human element was the fourth line in that electoral process, starting with the commission itself, the organizers of that election. And so it now became very difficult. So what we have seen, and that's my thinking, if you look at, for instance, the question you ask yourself, yes, against the backdrop of an electoral act that had just been signed, we now went into the election. And so there was a lot of optimism, new electoral act, electoral law, and then immediately after the election, we realized that we had done almost nothing by virtue of the outcome of the election. So the question you will now ask yourself is, after 23, 24 years of unbroken democracy, can you actually say, if the question is asked, have we made progress, in terms of our democratization process? And I think the answer is absolutely no. And I'll give you with facts. We were deploying about maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, in some of the elections, off-cycle elections, we were deploying about 35,000 security personnel, 40,000 security personnel to certain states, some states. After about 12 years, 16 years of unbroken democracy, you would think that we're going to draw down, maybe by now about 10,000. That tells you that the ethos and the ideals of democracy are being implemented. The politicians are learning lessons. INEC is getting it right. 2023, 24 years, we are still deploying 30,000, 35,000, 40,000 security personnel. That tells you that we have nothing actually has a lot. So I think it's a good thing that we have started, and the good thing about it is that it is coming from the politicians, because they are the ones that benefit from elections primarily. And they are the ones that lose elections primarily, apart from the effect it has on the people. So now they are the ones talking about some of those things we have complained about after this particular election. The ambiguity in the Electoral Act, electronic transmission, don't give INEC that option of, that the judges are now going to use as an excuse to say, look, you cannot compare INEC to, they are the ones that will decide what is going to happen. Then, of course, uploading of polling unit results. And then, of course, he has talked about diaspora voting, and I agree with him absolutely. So these are some of the issues. But again, you see, ultimately, so there are three things, and maybe to round off. One is that you have the law. Because you are going to, without the law, you cannot do advocacy. You cannot push anything. So when you have the law, you want to hope that the people who are going to implement the law are going to be honest and sincere and patriotic and have integrity. So where that fails, you're also going to hope that those who will interpret the law would also interpret it in accordance with the greater interests of the Nigerian society. Unfortunately, and I tell people, it's not also about law. It's not also about even evidence itself. Because, the law and evidence are meaningless when it has to be handled by a corrupt and a fraudulent person. Then evidence means nothing. And so these are some of the issues that I thought it is good that they are looking at it. But we also have to do much more to make sure that some of the fine lines, some of those things that we missed in the last Electoral Act, that we are much more stringent in making sure that at least they are included. Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, I would like you to comment also on some of the other topics that we touch upon. Okay. Particularly the latest development in the Middle East, and also this whole issue about Afro-democracy, now that there has been something perceived to be an attempted coup in Sierra Leone. Chude, you go first this time.
Yeah, well, with regards to what is happening in the Middle East, obviously it's a good thing. It's a good thing that there is a bit of a respite. A window was opened for humanitarian services, for negotiations over the hostages, and for cessation of bombing and all of those things. These are good. But again, after 4 days, we're getting to the end of that. After 4 days, what happens? Hostilities resume again, bombardments resume again, and all. So what do you do? So we must, and I also agree with the ambassador himself that also said a lot of things. You need to look for a more permanent solution to what's going on. But I think it seems to me most strange that you have most of these Arab countries who would always want to stay aloof and not get involved in what is happening in the Middle East. Especially, I mean, these are people that have always shown affinity with the Palestinian people. And yet they have never really forcefully stepped in to say, look, this is what we're going to do. Because ultimately, by the time this particular issue is resolved, of course, there's the short-term solution. What is the short-term solution and the long-term solution? The long-term solution is the reason for the crisis in the first place. People are talking about a two-state solution, which seems to have defied a solution all of these years. And then there's the shorter term. What happens if after the bombardment, Israel withdraws? Who takes over? Are you going to have a mandate by the United Nations maybe to compel? And I would think that some of the Arab countries in the region should play a more active role in trying to see what is happening, so that so that you provide a buffer.
Talking about that,
yes.
This deal was brokered by Qatar. The Prime Minister of Qatar playing a leading role in it. So it will not be nice to generalize that the Middle Eastern countries have been aloof.
No, I agree. Look, they have, it's not as if after all, they're all concerned about what is going on. They are all concerned about the wider implication of the crisis that is going on. You can see that at a time, Iran was doing some saber rattling and then now had to put pressure on Hezbollah to cease hostilities, because they don't want to, regardless of how they feel, they don't want to be drawn into a war, because you know what's going to happen in that region. So it is not as if, but what I'm saying, they have done well. Even Egypt has also played a role in this whole process, like Qatar you have also talked about. But beyond this, they should look for ways to get much more involved, so that what led to this crisis in the first place can be avoided. They need to play a more, a stringent role. And then that other thing in the charter, that thing that is, maybe one or two paragraphs in that Hamas charter, it should also is something that everybody should look at. For as long as you are irrevocably committed to the destruction of a state, you can never have peace.
Dr.
I
Biarere,
agree with
quickly.
you. As long as there is one issue that is at stake here, Israel is ready to make peace, even the Middle East. And of course, she mentioned the issue of the Arab nations being kind of standing aloof because of Iranian's involvement, Saudi Arabia and the rest of them. As long as, see, Israel will want to have peace because they are a very tiny nation among a sea of those who want them out. As long as there's that charter of arrangement in Hamas, whatever, that states that death to Israel, Israel must be extinguished, there can be no two-state solution. You cannot allow somebody who has sworn to have you dead control swaths of land where he can easily send a nuke into your territory. That's number one. Then on the issue, which is the issue of Afro-centered democracy, raised by Olusegun Obasanjo. See, democracy is democracy anywhere in the whole world. Democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. There is something Dele Fado to me said that is very, very key. Until we have citizens' participation, serious citizens' participation based on enlightenment, we will continue to have this kind of issue. We are practically in a situation where those who are enslaved are actually clapping for those that have enslaved them. I've always advocated for us to move forward. We must go back to what worked for us. The golden era of Nigeria remained 1960, 1963. And if we look at 1963, the governance, resource production and control, the physical, political framework of Nigeria was mutually agreed to by our forebearers. Awolowo, Azikiwe, Ahmadu Bello, Anthony Naro, they had different summits in the UK and in Nigeria where they agreed on a structural arrangement, on a political structure that worked for Nigeria before the military guy struck. For us to move forward, I will always advocate. Restructuring is very, very key. We don't even need to do it. The National Assembly should go back, dust up that 1963 Constitution with slight amendment. After all, we have 6 regions, just like we had 3 regions and later 4 regions in those areas, and implement the physical governance constitutional framework there. Amend it to suit our contemporaneous environment. Regions should control their resources and donate 30% to the center and 20% to the federal government. Regions should have a kind of strong autonomy. It was a kind of arrangement we had then that the leader of the national MPC, Ahmadu Bello, refused to become premier and nominated Tafawa Balewa to go and stayed to build his beloved north. We should look at that kind of arrangement. Senegal used to have the same problem. They had a bicameral system of government. They saw the cost was so much and they went for unicameral. If our political leaders are so sincere, if the president who had been at the forefront of resource control, physical federalism, sovereign national government is very, very sincere, this is the time for him to adopt the garb of statesman and ask us to bring the 1963 Constitution and adopt it whole line and sinker with slam. That's the only thing that can save this country.
Okay, in 1 minute.
Yeah.
The plight of domestic carriers complaining that the Nigerian government is not doing enough to protect their interests, just sucking up to foreign airlines and not paying attention to national interests, equity, reciprocal access to markets. Chude.
We've come a long way from when Nigeria boycotted the Commonwealth Games that pitted the British Prime Minister then and then the Queen of England. Very long way. Nigeria took a stand and the rest of Africa followed. They had no choice. That was the clout that Nigeria has then. And so in international relations, really, so it's often be said that you cannot give what you do not have. You have to have strength, internal strength. It is that strength that you're able to project outside. And I think that that is the problem. Nigeria is not as strong as Nigeria used to be many years ago when we played roles even during the apartheid regime and all of that, where we had a strong and vibrant economy. All of these things, have a way of also showing up in our foreign, relationship with other nations. It's the strength of the country. And that's why it's easier, a bit easier for some of these foreign airlines with the support of their governments as to do what they're doing to Nigerian airlines, and then we are not able to also reciprocate. They are protecting their national assets, so you don't blame them. We must also be able to protect our national asset and our national image, because this is also about the Nigerian image, about the Nigerian brand. And you expect that what they are doing for their own airlines, the Nigerian government should, as a matter of urgency and immediacy, be able to do this to protect our own national airlines, our own assets. It's as simple as that. But if they are not able to do that, then there's a problem at the level of international diplomacy on the Nigerian side.
Okay, gentlemen, let's take one more topic, and I'm going to come to you on this, Dr. Biariri. The Central Bank of Nigeria has directed banks to shore up their capital base to meet up with the projected $1 trillion economy. The CBN Governor, Nnaemeka, said this on Friday at the 58th annual dinner of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria in Lagos. He said the Bola Tinubu administration has an ambitious $1 trillion GDP growth target in the next 7 years, and that Nigerian banks will have to sit up as part of the difficult decisions required to put things right and rebuild the economy towards that target. Well, Dr. Biariri, this is the story. I was just worried that the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, had to be postponed for bankers to have a dinner. Twice now, they've postponed the Monetary Policy Committee meeting. But now, the CBN governor tells us $1 trillion economy.
Dr. Bati, we can easily grow our economy to $1 trillion in 5 years. 7 years is even a long time. This economy can easily be ramped up to $1 trillion in the next 5 years. And we are not going to build this economy to $1 trillion by just asking banks to jack up their capital base. Dr. Bati, look at the reports of Nigerian banks. Trillions of naira profit, yet the real sector of the economy, most of the operators there, the SMEs are dying. Yeah. That will show you the kind of mismatch, the kind of imbalance we have in the system. What we should be looking at is how do we deepen financial inclusion? How do we get the banks that are already in existence to do what they're supposed to do, which is financial intermediation and helping to grow the real sector economy. In Bangladesh, there's a bank called Grameen Bank. Grameen Bank is a microfinance bank. The last time I checked, Grameen Bank capital base is over $300 million.
That's Professor Yunus, right?
Yes, Yunus. And, I've always said this, Dr. Bati, what we need to do is to grow financial inclusion. Get every unbanked segment of Nigeria to be banked. And you don't do that increasing the share capital of tier 1 banks or the international banks. You do that by providing the enabling technology infrastructure, supporting the micro-based banks to bring in those who are in the unbanked segment into the bank segment. You can only grow a $1 trillion GDP by supporting production and fixing the physical side of the economy. I'll give you an example. I know of one particular customer that built an inland depot in Suleja. The man spent over 20 billion to do that project. But it is very difficult for him to get a loan from banks in Nigeria using that asset as a collateral. Why? Because the property is in Suleja. Today, the man is regretting it. But that was a project that was built to help build up the economy. Storage of gas oil that is there to develop and do roads and other things. In the north, the banks can only lend you money if you have houses in Ikoyi, Banana Island, VI. Go and check most of the other locations in Nigeria. Banks will not lend you money unless you bring collateral. You are going to borrow money to do a factory in Ahafia. You will have to bring your property in Banana Island to be able to collateralize. That is not the kind of banking we are looking at. The central bank governor has a lot of work to do. But beyond the central bank work, we need to look at the physical side. To build this economy, we can easily, from the agri sector, grow every year, produce, consume, and export nothing less than $200 billion worth of product and commodities. From the blue economy, we can easily ramp up $25 billion annually. From every sector of Nigeria, we can easily do this. Then we need to fix the physicals, and that has to do with governance at the federal, the state, and local government area. We need to fix security, which is very, very key. We also need to fix ease of doing business, and which includes judicial reforms. Because the entire investing world, they are looking at us. When they know that our judges can easily be bribed to pervert justice, nobody will invest his money here. When they know that there's insecurity that can allow them not to bring in, Gino brought in investment to come and do tomato value chain. It was destroyed by insecurity. Rather than bring in more money, they've ceased investment into Nigeria. So we have to look critical at the physical side, and that has to do with electoral reform, judicial reform, and constitutional amendment back to 1960-1963 constitutional framework.
Okay, Achike, your view
Yeah,
as we begin to wrap up.
Wrapping up. He was talking about financial inclusion, and that just reminds me of an event I happened to be at by the JDPC. I think Audu, the former Minister of Agriculture, was invited to give a talk, and he was, to farmers, a lot of them were interested, and he was saying, look, you've heard that the government has this special intervention fund, CBN, 12 billion here, sometimes 15 billion here, and the rest. That, well, I just want to tell you that you might not like it, what I want to say, but I'll just tell you that this money is not for you. It's not for people like you. It's for the very rich, the powerful, the mighty, the generous, and all. That it's not money for you. So that's why when he was talking about financial inclusion, I nodded my head, because this is the reality about what we're, going through in the country. And so, yes, the CBN governor has said a lot of things, what he intends to do, fiscal policy measures and all that, corporate governance, and but again, it's not just him alone. Because you see, whatever policy the CBN is going to carry out is going to be will be policies that will be dictated to by the political class. It's the politicians, they run the show. Perhaps in countries that have advanced, you would know how powerful the CBN governors are. They don't allow political interference. And so this is part of what we have been seeing in our polity all this while. Are they going to give him, are they going to give him the free hand to do what needs to be done without serious political interference? That tends to get in the way once in a while. But there are also so many other issues.
Thank you very much, Achike Chude. Thank you, Dr. Obiariri, for joining me on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show today. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.